So we're getting to our final session of the day, which is a hands-on workshop. So before we introduce our speaker to you, make sure, you're on hopefully a device right now watching this, but you should get your laptops out, get ready to be hands-on. I know that Flynn is going to want people to interact with him. So here we go. Hello, Flynn. Welcome.
Hi there. How are you doing?
We are great.
We are great. We have our laptop. We've got our jazz hands ready. We are ready.
But
I don't know how it's going to be. I'm not going to ask all the questions that come to my mind because you don't need to waste your time answering and troubleshooting my problems. But I'm sure that you will probably get a lot of questions throughout your hands-on lab. So this might be a very active. Are you able to see the chat and monitor it, or do you need us to jump in and help with questions?
I believe that I can see the chat, but I would be delighted to have you jump in and monitor and invoke the demo goddesses as
there you go. All right,
as you feel.
We will be there for you. Okay, so I will add your slides to the stream, and then we'll duck out and jump in with any questions. And before we do it, where are you calling in from?
I am just outside Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay, so we're down the street from each other, maybe.
Oh, where are y'all?
We're down near Plymouth.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So way down the street.
Way down the street.
Yeah, well, we have friends who spend a lot of time in Plymouth. It's
there you go.
Hardly an unreasonable place to be.
Exactly. All right. Well, off you go. Good luck.
All right.
Sounds good. Specifically.
Off somebody goes anyway, right? So yeah, I'm Flynn. I'm a tech evangelist with Buoyant, the folks who created Linkerd. That means that my role is to spread the word about what Linkerd is, what Linkerd's purpose is, and then to make sure that people actually know how to use it. On that note, Linkerd's purpose is, in fact, to make sure that all the developers in the cloud native world have freely available tools that help them make cloud native applications that are very secure, very reliable, easily observable. And in fact, that last one is what we're going to talk about right now, observability. As was mentioned, we're going to do a bit of background, and then we're going to jump into a live demo that is hands-on. If you want to follow along, get a Kubernetes cluster, clone the repo there, the Service Mesh Academy repo. In the observability directory in that repo, there is a shell script that will go and set up your cluster in exactly the way that my cluster is set up. The last bit is that one of the things that I do is I use an ingress controller, Emissary, which I believe Daniel was just talking about, to arrange it so that instead of using port forwarding, we go through and actually get to use host names to route to different things. So it's just a convenience thing for me because I hate remembering the port numbers. So if you want to follow along exactly as I'm doing it, you'll also need to arrange it so that the three names, viz.example.com, books.example.com, and emoji.example.com all point to the ingress controller. Or you can just watch what I'm doing. It'll work fine. It's probably not as much fun for you guys, but yeah, there we go. Okay, so background. Observability is kind of the classic cloud native problem. Seeing things inside your cluster is really hard. This is being made worse by the fact that computers are fast and getting faster. The slow ones are 1 billion times faster than we are. And also, as things start getting more complex in your application, this gets harder and harder. We like to think about somebody in the cloud interacting with our application, but what they're really interacting with is a cluster with a ton of random little services in it. And it's not that hard to understand what's going on if the problem is with that first cluster with the ingress. But suppose it's this thing buried down here in the call graph. And even worse, suppose that it only fails when it follows this particular path through the graph to get to the broken service. And other than that, it works okay. This is the sort of thing that we're talking about when we get into observability. How do you deal with this kind of a problem? Service meshes in general are really well positioned to help with this because they get to watch all of this traffic. They can see what's going on, and they can give you an interface into having that information made available to you. Linkerd in particular has a couple of things. We're going to talk about two specific tools that are intended to address this exact problem within Linkerd. One of them is Linkerd Viz. The other one is the service profile CRD. Linkerd Viz, as the name kind of implies, is a tool that's meant to let you see what's going on inside the cluster. So you can see this stuff with the communications graph. You get to see metrics with the success rate and how many things are happening, all that stuff. It's basically just a really convenient way to go and look into it. It works both from the web and from the command line. We're going to see both of those in practice. And it will give you information about all of the services that are in your mesh all the time. The other tool that we're going to talk about today is the service profile CRD, which is kind of a way to, it gives Linkerd a bit of a hint about particular services that are worthy of attention, even if nobody is currently looking at them in the dashboard, right? So in this particular service profile, we have it set up so that if we see a delete request to this URL, which has some random ID in it, we will end up aggregating those under the book/ID_JSON name so that it's easier as a human to keep track of what's going on. And maybe more importantly, this also allows Linkerd to be aggregating those metrics in the background all the time, irrespective of what else is going on. The service profile CRD also allows Linkerd to dictate some policy. A particular one that we're going to look at is retries. We'll look at that a little bit later. All right. That's actually it for background. If anybody has questions so far, now's a great time to jump in. Otherwise, we shall cross our fingers and dive into the demo and see what works and what breaks. Hopefully everything will work. Okay. So I'm doing this on a K3D cluster. The single node K3D. I've gone through and set everything up ahead of time just to save a little bit of time during this. Specifically, I mostly did things according to the quick starts. And I'm going to come back to that mostly in a minute. So this is showing you how we installed Linkerd here. A couple of things I'd like to call out since Linkerd 2.12 is pretty new. The first one is that you have to explicitly install the Linkerd CRDs once you go to 2.12. And also once you go to 2.12, due to changes in Grafana's licensing, you need to install Grafana yourself right before you install Linkerd Viz. The other thing going on here is the latest stable version of Linkerd is 2.12.1. I'm actually using a pre-release of 2.12.2 here. That's Linkerd Edge 22.10.1, which is available. You can use it if you like. There's one thing in this demo that will break with 2.12.1, and I'll point that out when we get to it. Okay. And there's a question on the chat from Tom. Where do you see differences and similarities between service meshes and comprehensive tracing? The simplest answer to that question is that a service mesh can provide you a lot of observability information without needing to modify your application to propagate tracing headers and doing crazy things like that. They absolutely both have their place. A lot of it depends on how much you want to change the app and on what level of thing you're looking for. Hopefully that answers that question, at least for now. Okay, we installed Emojivoto and Books app directly from their quick starts. We did go ahead and inject them into Linkerd so that they are participating in the mesh. And finally, this is a single replica emissary for the ingress controller where we force the number of replicas from 3 down to 1. That's just to make it a little bit easier on K3D. Don't do this in production. It's a bad idea. For demos, it works great though. Okay. At this point, things ought to be working. Also, all of the steps that I just did for installation are exactly what's in that setup cluster.sh script that I mentioned in the repo. All right. We have a green check mark here at the end so that we know that Linkerd is working. That's always a good sign. And now imagine, if you will, that it's late Friday night and you've just gotten a call saying, hey, something is wrong with Emojivoto. At least in my life, this never comes with any information about exactly what is wrong. It's just something is wrong. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by using Linkerd from the command line to take a look at general statistics over all the namespaces to see what the service mesh thinks is going on across everything that we're running. And we can see for pretty much immediately that there is in fact some sort of a problem with Emojiboto. It's not 100%. We also see that there's a problem with the Books app namespace, but nobody's complaining about that yet. So we're going to focus on Emojiboto. So if we look at Emojiboto, we can further use Linkerd to drill into the individual deployments in the Emojiboto namespace. If we do that, we can see that there's a voting deployment that seems to have some trouble, and there's a web deployment that seems to have some trouble. I'm kind of pretending for the moment that we don't necessarily know the architecture of this application. I'm imagining that we're in the role of a platform engineer rather than somebody writing it. So we're just kind of discovering as we go. If we look a little bit further at those unhappy deployments, we can take a look at them. Linkerd top is going to show me traffic in real time as it happens. And it will keep track of which ones are most common. It'll keep track of how long they take and where or how well they work. This is kind of a wide display. I can zoom out and make it easier to see the whole thing at once, but I think I'm just going to cursor over here rather than making the text smaller on everybody. And a thing that we can see kind of immediately is that it looks like voting for donuts has a problem. I should probably, just to make sure, in case people have not seen it before, this is the Emojivote application where you get to vote for your favorite emoji, and you can look at the leaderboard. It's very exciting. We also have we'll come back to books in a little bit. So if we come back to this thing, we can see that voting for donuts seems to never ever work, which is a little bit strange. Donuts tend to be kind of popular, so that could be a problem. If we look at the voting deployment rather than the web deployment, what do we see there? Well, first we can see that the only things that are happening in the voting deployment are, voting for specific things. And yeah, everything seems to be working fine except for voting for donuts. Now, really, probably at this point, we could stop and go back to the developers and say, hey, there's a problem with voting for donuts. But let's see if maybe there's a little bit more we can do. We can try to get a little bit more information about what's going on with Linkerd tap. Linkerd top showed us the top requests going through, and it kept updating for which ones were most common and how well they were working. Linkerd tap actually taps the traffic and shows us every single thing going through in real time. So if we run that, then, a lot of what we're seeing here looks pretty okay. So here we can see a vote for Mrs. Claus. They got a status of 200, gRPC status okay, that's all good. But this does not look so good. This is a post to the Vote Donut where it still shows us an HTTP status of 200, but it shows us a gRPC status of unknown. To be clear, unknown does not mean that Linkerd doesn't know how this went. Unknown is a specific gRPC status. That means something went wrong at the gRPC layer, but we have no other information about it. So we know that there's a problem with that gRPC request. So we can also use tap, by the way, to look only at the donut votes, just to filter out everything else. We might have to wait a little bit because, people don't vote for donuts all that often. Ah, there we go. Okay. Same sort of thing there, right? Where we're seeing unknown, the gRPC error. And if we really want to drill into this one, there's a way we can run tap, but we can ask it to use the JSON formatter. I know it's a little hard to see, but that -o JSON, the rest of this command is exactly the same as the other one we did, where we are saying tap everything in the web deployment in the Emojivoto namespace, show all the traffic going to the voting deployment with this particular path for voting donuts, but now we want to see it in JSON. And if we do that, the demo goddesses are not smiling on me today. This makes me very sad. If we do that, though, let me do this. Well, this is how you know it's a live demo, people. Let's do that maybe in the correct one. All right, well. So basically, you saw a second ago that it was outputting one line a piece. With the JSON formatter, it will output a large JSON block, and we'll get into being able to see what's going on. We'll be able to see a little bit more of the detail. I think what we're going to do right now is continue onward, and let's see if this works from the web browser, shall we? If we come over here and we look into the Emojivoto namespace, the first thing is that using this from the web browser, we can see that we have this traffic generator talking to our web deployment, which in turn talks to voting and emoji. So if we'd started from this place, we wouldn't have had to go through and try to discover things from the command line, right? We can further see pretty much the same things with the voting and the web deployment having some issues here. And we can come up over here and drill into the web deployment, where Viz will show us the Viz in the web gets to show us things like, oh yeah, so everything is fine with Prometheus, everything is fine with emoji, but this business with the voting deployment, that's where some issues are happening. We can also scroll down here and we get to see, this is pretty much the same as the top that we did earlier, where we get to see live traffic happening. But we can also go through and we can dig into this. And this, by the way, this is the thing that's currently broken in 2.12.1. So if you're following along with that, just keep an eye on this. This will happen. Or sorry, this is the way this is supposed to be going. You can see that when I clicked on that little microscope, it already filled in the vote donut for me. And if I start running this, I can wait to see about... I might go over and just vote for a donut. There we go. There's one. And if I come over here and expand that, this is what we should be able to see in the JSON block. When I run this from the CLI, it was running on my laptop. When I'm using the web browser here, this is running in the cluster. I think what I'm seeing here is some issues with communications between the laptop and the cluster. So I'm not going to try to debug that right this second. But we can see in particular, here's the request. Is the request coming in? We've got the response coming back with an HTTP status of 200. We can see a gRPC status of 2. That should be 0 for a success. And we can see that we don't really have anything more detailed than just error. But basically, at this point, what you're sitting here doing is you have the ability to go through the web browser. You have the ability to see specific requests that come in. You can drill into those requests in detail. And at this point, yeah, we could go back to the developers and say, hey, something is wrong. Maybe we can sort that out, right? Now, an interesting thing about this is that this took longer than it should have, really, because we had to go and wait for those donut requests to come in, right? We had to sit there and watch things happen, wait for the requests to come in, and we can make this better with service profiles. It would go a lot faster if Linkerd were already just watching everything and doing, and keeping track of it for us, right? So we can use the Linkerd profile command to generate a service profile from a protobuf. And in this particular case, we're looking at the emoji service. This is a gRPC service. It has a protobuf definition, and we can use Linkerd profile to turn that into a service profile that looks like this, that basically just tells it, yeah, so people can use this to post to the list all service. They can post to find by shortcode. And that's really all they can do with this particular emoji proto. So if we apply that to the cluster, now Linkerd can use that. We can do the same thing for the voting gRPC service. And the trick comes in with the web service, because it's not a gRPC service. It's just doing your normal REST stuff. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to tell Linkerd viz profile that we want it to just tap traffic going into the web deployment and use that to build a profile. In this case, we did this for 10 seconds of traffic. And in those 10 seconds, we saw people doing gets for APIs and votes and things like that. So it ends up with a fairly simple service profile. Again, it wrote it for us. This might not be complete, depending on whether or not people really did all of the things that are available for that service. But if nothing else, this is a great place to start, and we could go and edit it by hand later. We could also obviously have written the entire thing by hand, but where's the fun in that? So if we apply that, now we can go back into the browser. And if we do go back into the browser here, in Emojivoto, this is the same place we were earlier, just looking at the Emojivoto namespace, looking at the topology. But now, if we drill into one of these things, we'll pick on voting, why not? If we drill into one of these things now, there's a route metrics tab that wasn't there before. It was there, it was just useless before. If we click on that, that is now showing us all of the things that it found by looking at the service profiles. And if we sort here, we can instantly see that Vote Donut is the one with a 0% success rate. So, and again, from that, we could go through and decide to go and tap the traffic. And so let's go ahead and do that. Emojivoto, we want the voting deployment. We happened to get a donut. That was nice. And here we can just expand that immediately. So basically, using the service profile, it's not so much that we have access to more information. It's that the information that we want is more immediately accessible, because Linkerd is keeping track of it, whether or not we're in here waiting for things to happen. So we've now seen a few different ways of tracking down that, yes, voting for donuts is broken. Somebody should fix that. And we could go back to the devs and tell them this and point them to the specifics of the error where we found out, yeah, it's a gRPC failure. You probably need to go and look a little bit deeper into there. So overall, job well done on that. And once again, let's imagine that it's late on Friday, and now we're getting a report that something is wrong with books. So actually, before we go into this one, do we have any other questions about all the stuff that was just happening there with the emoji service? Not seeing anything else show up in the chat. So, all right, cool. So let's go ahead and duck back in and take a look at our books service. Okay. A nice thing about the book service is, if you're paying attention way back when in the beginning, then we actually went ahead and installed the service profiles for the Books app already. That means that we can go straight to the route metrics rather than needing to wait for traffic to happen. In this particular case, we're going to, again, start from the CLI. And we're going to start by looking at the route information for the web app in the Books app. Since we didn't say --2, this is all traffic coming into the web app. And we can see that a lot of different things are happening here. Most of them are doing okay, but these two particular things are, that looks a little odd, right? Failing about half the time. Okay. So this raises questions about, well, all right, we know that there's some problems with those things, but we can also see that there's things going on that reference authors and reference books. So let's see if the web app is talking to the author's service and see how that's going. Actually, everything for the web app talking to the author's service looks good, so that's kind of nice. Let's see about if it's talking to the book service and how that's going. It is. That's kind of causing trouble here. Again, failing about half the time. It's a little bit weird. And we can also check to see if the books app is talking to the authors. Sorry, if the books deployment is talking to the author's service. Note that we switched to deploy books here rather than deploy web app. And here we can see that it only does one thing, where it's trying to do a head request for a particular author, and that seems to be failing half the time. Okay, so that's a little bit interesting. Now, once again, we get to do all of this from the web browser. Here we're going to do into the Books app namespace. And here again, we immediately have a better view of the topology of what's going on than we did from the command line, which is, always kind of handy. We start off again with all of the information about the success rate of various things kind of immediately there. So let's go and take a look. We'll start with the web app like we did there. Note that we can pretty much immediately see that there's this path from traffic to the web app to the books deployment, and that's the only one that seems to be causing us problems. Everything dealing with the author's deployment here is still green, which is nice. I'm going to pretend that that error is not occurring because it's that transient connectivity thing again. So if we look at the route metrics here, I said, if we look at the route metrics here, oh, that's making me not very happy. So when in doubt, try reloading the page. Danielle, you're muted if you're mocking me for not invoking the demo goddesses well enough.
I mean, maybe just a little bit. I mean, we did offer that advice before. It was good, solid advice.
It really was. I mean, wow. So this is a little entertaining and unusual. I'm not going to lie. I'm not accustomed to this happening when I'm doing this. I think what I'm going to do is we will do this in particularly, let's just do it this way, shall we? Let's come back over here, and I'm going to do this where, sorry, I'm getting another terminal window set up so that it might actually be readable for everybody. Yeah, I would believe that my Prometheus is dead too, but it's that's a little surprising. Oh wait, it came back.
See, it's back when okay,
maybe
it was because you considered the demo goddess.
Maybe it was, yeah. the thing that's
All right, I'll drop.
particularly, oh, it's, actually having you there on the side, maybe that's the help.
Maybe it's a
helpful.
good
Danielle was
omen.
the good luck.
Yeah, maybe so. Okay, so
Well, there is a quick question, which is,
and we can talk about that.
what did deploying the profiles do for us in the last demo?
The big thing that it did was it kind of did two things. One was it told Linkerd to be aggregating the statistics for the various deployments and the various gRPC calls, even when we weren't actively watching it in the Viz dashboard. So rather than having to go in and wait for somebody to vote for a donut and see, oh, that didn't work, we could go over instead and just click on route metrics and say, oh, look, voting for donuts hasn't been working for a little while. And that's exactly what's going on there. Now, first off, Elinglet, if that did not address what you're getting at, then let me know. In the meantime, I am a little bit curious to see exactly. Let's see, shall we? What is going on in this cluster right now? Question from Bagharsh. You were showing an architecture where we're using the service mesh. Can we use it with a distributed architecture? Linkerd is, oh yeah, look at all those restarts. Yeah, I think that's a memory issue on my cluster here. That's an excellent call. And yeah, Catherine, clearly Danielle and Lisa are the demo goddesses. Yeah.
There we are.
Danielle's adorable dog that has joined us. If you're wondering why we keep looking down, is because we're petting the cutest doggy.
Okay. So, sorry, I got sidetracked. Can we use Linkerd with the distributed architecture?
We all get sidetracked by the cute dogs.
I was actually just thinking about the fact that my dog is downstairs and he's being sufficiently quiet that I'm getting a little concerned.
You go downstairs and there's a hole chewed through your
I know.
wall.
That might be happening here too. Other dog went down there.
Anyway, so Linkerd can definitely deal with distributed things at the TCP layer. A lot of what's going on here, we're specifically kind of focusing on some of this layer 7 stuff like HTTP and gRPC. So kind of yes and no, if that helps any, Vakash. Let's see. I think what we're going to do is we're going to... Actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the Emojivoto application because we're kind of done with that for now. And we're going to see if that maybe makes life a little bit happier as we go forward. If not, well, we'll just hope that the demo goddess's presence over there on the screen is going to help us out, shall we? Yeah. All right. Here we go. The thing that I'm finding particularly fascinating about this, by the way, is that I've obviously done this demo, many, many times, and not really had this situation before.
I'm wondering if it's the Hopin platform that is just, Hopin is the platform we're using to do this, and I'm wondering if maybe that's part of the issues with the live demos.
It's possible, but just it's. I'm not checking to see exactly why, like, was that an kill or did I run out of CPU or something like that? I also just realized that I had another K3D cluster running beside this one. And that will be, since I'm on a Macintosh, that will be putting pressure on my Docker installation itself. So gotten rid of both of those things and deleting that namespace finished. So yeah, let's flip back and see if things are going to be a little bit happier, shall we? Everybody keep your fingers crossed.
They're crossed.
Like I said, this is how you know we're doing it live, right?
Yeah, we've got 8 paws crossed here too.
Excellent. Also notice that the Emojivoto namespace has disappeared, That's a good sign. We know we're looking at the right cluster, and things are updating live. All right. Back into the Books app namespace here. And again, we've got, same topology as before. We've got all the same metrics as before. We're going to go into the web app, go there, and everybody, okay. My thanks to the demo goddesses.
All right, our service was there. We'll leave you to it.
No. You better stay. Okay, so here, as we look through this, since we already had the service profiles here, we're seeing basically the same information that we always had for the same thing that we always had when we were looking at it from the CLI. Just when things are happy with the web app, it's usually quicker to see things this way if you have access to it and if you can get access to all this, right? From here, we can go and let's take a look at the books deployment. We go into the books deployment. Again, we can see this path from the web app into books into authors that's red. That's an immediate thing to worry about. We come in here and we can see, these things are failing as we go through and we're trying to do this stuff. So from there, let's go ahead and look in at authors. And again, as we're looking into these things, when we look at the route metrics down here, these are requests coming into this particular deployment. So most of the requests coming into the authors deployment are succeeding, but not all of them. This head request is failing, and it's failing about half the time. Now, interesting thing about the head request. Head requests don't carry any data on input, and they are required to be idempotent. If you run head twice in a row, you're required to get the same thing back, right? You remember I mentioned earlier that service profiles could do policy as well in some cases? So if we look at the service profile, then one of the things it can do is configure retries. If we go and configure retries, let's scroll down here. For routes that are idempotent and don't have bodies, you can edit the service profile and add is retryable to the retryable route. Okay, so if we flip back over here, what we're seeing is a path from, let me just go back to the namespace as a whole. So we're seeing that all of the paths that seem to be failing here, they all seem to come back to this one head request that's failing in the author's deployment. Head request is idempotent and it doesn't have any data, so this is a prime candidate for retrying. So let's try it. We'll set up the service profile to tell Linkerd to retry that request for us, and then we'll see if things get better. If they do get better, we don't have to wake up the developers to fix this problem, right? Okay, so we're going to do exactly what it said in the docs with adding is retryable true to the books service profile. SP is an abbreviation for service profile here, so we're going to edit the service profile named authors.booksapp.service.cluster.local. We do that. All the way at the bottom is the route for this head request. And according to the documentation, which is never wrong, what we have to do is that. Okay, well, nice that it took it. Okay, so now we're going to go back to that routes bit. Vagarsh, I'm going to come back to the multi-cluster thing in a minute. We're going to go back to Viz routes. We're explicitly looking from books to authors, and we're asking for the wide output so we get to see both the actual success rate and the effective success rate. This is the one we're looking for. This is the request that we're looking at. Line wrapped because, I'm zoomed in. But we can see that the effective success rate is climbing, even though the actual success rate is still hanging out down around 50%. So that looks like it's actually on the way up to, it looks like it's on the way to 100%. let's go back and look at the Books app, from the web app to the Books app. And in this case, we should only see the effective success rate. And in fact, that's gone all the way back to 100% already. So it seems like it does indeed, while it was running, it seems like, yeah, doing that retry has made life better, right? So this is actually a good thing. There's still a problem in the cluster, but we have successfully gone and arranged it so that the users are being insulated from that failure. And we were able to do it without having to modify the application at all and without having to wake the developers up on Friday night. To come back to your Vagarsh's question, Linkerd does indeed support multi-cluster connectivity. Just to make it easier to see while I'm doing this. Linkerd does support multi-cluster connectivity. There's, in the Service Mesh Academy repo that I pointed you to earlier, there is a directory in there called, let's see, let's go back to the terminal for a moment. I hope you can read that. If you look in this multi-cluster failover directory, that's the Service Mesh Academy workshop on how to do multi-cluster and how to fail over between clusters and things like that. The Viz dashboard that I've been showing over here only deals with one cluster at a time. There is a paid product called Buoyant Cloud that does better with that. But that directory, the multi-cluster failover directory, is the easiest place, I think, to see that sort of thing. It has pointers to docs and things. Let me see, though, if I can just go ahead and find one in there that I can put in the chat. Are there any other questions while I'm doing that? All right, here is, I think I have to do, so I've, Danielle and Lisa, I have put that link into the chat. I believe that y'all have to copy it over.
Oh, yep, we can do that for you.
Straightforward way to renew Linkerd certificates managed by Cert Manager. Allow me to point you once again, allow me to point you to the Service Mesh Academy on Linkerd certificate management. If you're running Linkerd 2.10.2 and you want to upgrade to 2.11, my immediate gut feel is that you probably shouldn't need to renew the certificate in order to do the upgrade, assuming that your certificate, isn't about to expire or something like that. Is there, but, probably, I'm not sure how much time we have right now, but if you want to put a little bit more detail in there, I could try to advise further, but that might be something better to take to the Linkerd Slack at slack.linkerd.io. You can find me there as @Flynn.
If you need to,
yeah.
I don't know how much else you want to talk about. You got about 15 more minutes, I think.
This is pretty much all about questions from my perspective, and all about regrets of not invoking the demo goddesses earlier.
We think we can blame the Hopin platform here on this one. This is the second issue when there was no issue testing this right before.
It's it is definitely a little odd. It's actually really odd because right before, in this case, was literally right before I got on the call. So it's
same with the last presenter. So we're gonna go with,
and we're
gonna go with that.
Yeah, I didn't. didn't see Daniel's presentation. I'm so sorry, Daniel. But I'm accustomed to Daniel checking his presentations out pretty solidly. So yeah.
Oh yeah, he ran it right before. So I know it's probably like you said, a memory issue, because obviously we've got all the cameras going. You've got all the cameras going. You've got all the screens going. So that's probably taxing out and it's not a lightweight platform, from what I can.
Kinda not.
Rodrigo has just come back and said he's concerned about upgrading via Helm chart and keys.
So, okay, with the Helm chart in particular, when you are working with Linkerd using the Helm chart, upgrading or installing, you're basically always going to want to set, you're going to explicitly want to set the secrets via the values.yaml for the Helm chart, and it should be okay if you do that. But let me see if I can find the upgrade docs. And by the way, Rodrigo, I would also recommend that you skip 2.11 and go straight to 2.12, but that's up to you. Let's see. Here we go. All right.
That's an interesting point you brought up, because not all, especially open source technologies, let you leapfrog versions. They make you install the next one and then upgrade to the next one and then the next one. Can you just leapfrog from 10 to 12?
How dangerously do you want to play things?
While you're running in production?
I put a link to the upgrade instructions for 2.12 into the chat for y'all to copy over. The best way is indeed, I really should have phrased that differently. The best way is indeed to go from 2.10 to 2.11 to 2.12. What I really should have said was not skip 2.11. I really should have said, don't stop with 2.11.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I heard that, yes. The
mea culpa. I misspoke. Yeah, that would be a little interesting. It would probably would. Yeah, I'd say do it one at a time. That'll be safer. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this until we have a need for it as well.
So I would say to anybody who's on this, if you have more questions, please enter them now. This is your opportunity.
Now is a great time.
Flynn, questions?
And Rodrigo, definitely, if you have further questions, hit me up on Slack and we can dig into the details there.
Yeah, and does anybody else who's running this, were other folks able to be successful? We don't only want to hear about the issues in chat, we want to hear about the success stories too. So if you show of hands if you actually got it up and running and everything's working, and if you learned something, and just anything you want to say in the chat. And in the meantime, too, we're going to remind everyone that this is not 1 but 2 day conference, a little different than last time. So tomorrow we also have a fantastic lineup. We've got Apple coming in. We've got DoorDash. We have folks from a maintainer from the Argo project. So lots more learning is going to happen tomorrow. Of course, we'll also have presentations from Pulumi, from Cockroach DB, my near and dear to my heart. And I know I'm skipping someone. We've got
Fairwinds
again, because we can't get enough of Danielle and Fairwinds. CNCF will cartograph us. Are you going to talk about more?
No, I'm not speaking. I'm just hosting tomorrow. No, we have a lightning talk from Catherine.
That's true.
She will be talking about the business value subcommittee. So lots of good stuff.
Yeah. See, that is kind of bringing up a good point. I mean, everybody, Catherine is, Buoyant, Linkerd, but also we all wear many hats, and that's how it is with open source projects, and that's what it takes to bring all this fabulous technology to, into the world. And so we all wear lots of other hats. I'm a CNCF ambassador. Danielle is a co-chair of
the cartographers working group. Yeah, just one.
Okay.
One.
Oh, really? I thought she's such an overachiever. I figured there was more projects involved. I love showcasing new technology. You keep hearing me talk about Project Argo. It's kind of one of my favorite side hustles these days. There's just so many great new projects that are coming out from, and even CNCF. We just saw Istio going into CNCF incubation. It's kind of a big announcement. I'll always love to remind people that I ran the first ever Istio meetup. So I'm very proud of that.
We won't hold that against you.
And we do have some questions on here, so let's ask you some questions. Yeah, they're coming, like, oh God, we got to shut them up. So a few questions. How would you compare Linkerd to
Istio? Linkerd. Oh wow. Sorry, I have to be polite. They are both service meshes, obviously. Linkerd is really, really much lighter weight than Istio, is probably the simplest way to put it. In practice, we tend to hear people saying that it is much simpler to get Linkerd up and running in the first place and to, update and all that kind of stuff. We find that what we hear is people say that operationally, Linkerd just is less costly than Istio. Full disclosure, I work for Buoyant. I'm a little bit biased here, right? But don't just take my word for it. It's very, very easy to go and try Linkerd in a throwaway cluster. Give it a shot. See what you think.
Well, and related to what you said, the second part of that is you mentioned multi-cluster environment. Is Linkerd more efficient and secure for these types of environments?
We think so. We could have a really long and fascinating conversation if we got some of the Istio maintainers and some of the Linkerd maintainers to sit down and talk about security in their respective meshes, right? The flip side of that one is, in the security world, operational complexity is considered insecure because as the operations get more and more complex, it becomes easier and easier for people to make mistakes, and it becomes easier and easier for some of those mistakes to have real consequences to security. So Linkerd has always had a very strong focus on operational simplicity. And again, I'm biased, but we think that's a really good idea in something that's supposed to be secure. So.
That's a great answer. I mean, we love to automate all the things to get that human error component out of it, but there's always going to be that user error element, and that's a really good point. As much as you can simplify, and I am not biased, so I will also double down on what you said. Linkerd plays nicely with others. Your team and one of our mutual customers was able to get Linkerd working with Cockroach, which was a really cool thing because we don't play as well with Istio or service meshes in general. So thank you to Team Buoyant and to our mutual customer who talked about this on stage at KubeCon last year, actually, or last spring. It's all blurring together in Valencia, and talked about Linkerd and Cockroach, and so I agree. Linkerd is much simpler to use. It's a little bit more open in terms of integrations and playing well with other technology that can sometimes cause problems. So yay for Linkerd.
Well, and we do have a multi-part question, which is Linkerd going to release an API gateway ingress? And the source of the question is that many of the features of north-south traffic is similar to east-west traffic.
Yeah. So this is one where I have to be careful about what I say because I am not allowed to say things that officially set Buoyant's policy or roadmap or anything like that, right? So I think that the safest answer there is to say that, well, north-south traffic can be kind of similar to east-west traffic. And there are situations where people have asked us before, hey, is there maybe a way I can do this with just one product instead of two products? We're looking at it. If we can come up with a way that we could include an ingress that is as operationally clean as the rest of Istio for the mesh? Yeah, maybe. And, for example, Linkerd is starting to adopt some of the Gateway API. Obviously, the Gateway API was focused on north-south traffic, so that kind of makes things a little bit more interesting as well. I'm actually involved with the Gamma project, which is adapting the Gateway API for the needs of service mesh. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, and we'll see.
Awesome. Yes, for people who asked about recorded sessions, yes, it will be recorded. We'll be getting them all up live so you can see them on the KubeCrash website.
Complete with failing clusters and all.
It's part of the fun. Totally part of the fun.
One other thing, a point that Catherine made in the chat that I'll reiterate from the security perspective is there is another kind of interesting thing in that most of the meshes that are not Linkerd tend to use Envoy as their proxy for handling the data plane. Envoy is a fine proxy. It's very powerful. It's very complex. It can end up burning up a fair amount of resources if you're trying to run lots and lots of them like you do in a service mesh. But an interesting point is that Envoy is also a pretty large, complex C++ code base. And Linkerd deliberately did not use Envoy, instead choosing to write the proxy to be deliberately small, fast, and secure. And they did it in Rust. We, the company, but the people who did it were not me, so I keep saying they. But it's deliberately cast in Rust instead of C++, simply because Rust does a better job of handling a bunch of security constraints than C++ does, memory safety being a really, really big point there.
Yeah, and Rodrigo makes a great point about the custom resource definitions, which are extensions of the default Kubernetes API. And by the way, thank you for all of the great comments that everyone is putting in.
Yes, very much.
The chat room. So we love how chatty everyone's been. And yes, Wes, thank you for your answer, Flynn. Okay.
The difficult part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a previous life, I was the original author of the Emissary-ingress. 100%. The most challenging thing that Emissary works with is trying to figure out semantics that mesh with Envoy semantics that we can still explain to real humans, because Envoy is extremely complex to work with.
Awesome. Well, if there's no more questions now, Flynn, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
And I'm sure we'll see you at KubeCon, so that will be exciting.
And on that note, really quickly, if you can toss the screen share back up for a moment. There is a workshop that we are doing for service meshes in production. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm doing that workshop. So if you enjoyed watching me deal with failing clusters and all that sort of stuff, then we'll probably see more of that at this one. I would love to see everybody there. But that will be
in real life, so you won't have to deal with the hop-in.
It won't be on the hop-in platform.
No, I'll have other complexities for that one.
I love how busy they keep you. No rest for the wicked.
Yeah. Also, every month, Buoyant hosts the Service Mesh Academy, where you get to go in and learn a bunch of stuff about service meshes, Linkerd, all that. The next one, we are skipping October because, KubeCon. The next one is on the 17th of November, where we're going to be taking a deep dive into what actually happens when you start booting things with Linkerd and init containers and CNI and all that massive mad stuff. And beyond that, once again, you can reach me via email, flynn@buoyant.io, or you can reach me as @Flynn at slack.linkerd.io. That is our community Slack. Would love to see you there as well.